7.3 IDI. Oh, it's missing something. I'll just add that in. I'll just add that in right there. Turbo. How much power does it make? All of it. So I'm cleaning my shop, and yes, it still looks like a disaster in here, but it's a drastic improvement over what it was. Like, there's actually room to move around in here, mostly because the car's not here right now, but I stripped this piece of crap of all of its good parts. So I've got a spare turbo IDI and injection pump and all kinds of cool stuff. But while I was cleaning my shop, I found the old 2.3 that was in the Ranger that I swapped the rotary engine out of. And I still don't know to this day why this engine was no good. I suspect it had broken oil rings or I know it had no compression, but I want to know what's actually wrong with it. So I'm going to tear into it a little bit just to see. I've always wanted to either build one of these in really high compression or a turbocharged one. Let's find out. So what is extremely disappointing is I couldn't find a smoking gun on this thing. So it could just be that it was starting to burn oil, and it kept, like, you could see how much it was burning a lot of oil. That it was fouling plugs. Maybe all my plugs were just fouled when I yanked this engine out, but it was getting hard to start, especially hot. So I thought it had no compression. The cylinder walls are a lot better than I expected. You can see this one's the only one with scoring. It's starting to have, number 3's got some scoring in it, but there's no visible damage. Like, there isn't great crosshatch, but it's not that bad. I would have expected it to be a lot worse. So I'm gonna have to go down the rabbit hole now of how much it would cost to put H-beam rods and just do a general rebuild kit on it there, and put it in the other little Ranger I've got, because that one, the engine's completely wore out, worse than this one actually. Well, it still runs. Shitty, but it runs. There's nothing worse than not finding a smoking gun when you're looking for a smoking gun. There's nothing wrong with these cylinders. I mean, yes, there's some minor scoring. That does not explain why this thing ran as bad as it did and wouldn't start hot. There's no broken rings. There's no visible damage. The bearings are in good shape. There was no sludge in the oil pan. I don't know. It might have just been a faulty PCV valve and fouled plugs. It doesn't explain the burning oil, though. But, I mean, there was some scoring in number 3, so maybe that's part of it. But the PCV valve might have been part of it. I don't know. I didn't look into it that far. I think this thing needs some high compression pistons and some forged rods. So what I figured out from doing research on this thing, this 2.3, is that it's a huge waste of time. And I still like the 2.3, but it's a huge waste of time because I have too many of the wrong parts. So the block is fine, the crank is fine, the rods would need to be upgraded, the pistons would need to be upgraded. I have to get the head machine down, but I have the wrong head. So I need a single plug head, not a dual plug head. And then it's worth camming it and doing some of the other stuff. But there's several components I don't have. Like, I don't have a naturally aspirated manifold. Or, sorry, not naturally aspirated. I don't have a carbureted manifold. I only have a fuel-injected manifold. So I'd have to round up a lot of parts that I don't have, and I don't even know where to get anymore. The wrecking yards around here only have new stuff. So this thing, basically, it's costing me nothing to have it sitting there. So it's going to end up getting tucked back in its little spot until I decide what to do with it. I know what's wrong with it now, and I know the block's in good shape, and I know for the most part it's in good shape, so it can be just honed and put back together. But I would like to do some performance mods, cheap stuff, getting the head machine down and stuff like that. But it can wait for now until I find better parts or I need it for something, which I do not. I've decided to yank out the 7.3 IDI, the one I pulled out of the silver truck here. This thing's had a lot of engines in the last few years, so it had the naturally aspirated 7.3 IDI that it came with, even though it was a 460 truck originally. And then it got that one, which was a wore out turbo 6.9 IDI turbo, and which was junk. And I've stripped all the turbo parts off it and put them in a pile here. So I'm not sure I'm going to bolt this stuff on. I think I might just sell it on Kijiji. I'm going to take all the turbo IDI stuff, make a pile, the air filter box, everything, and probably just get rid of it. But before I do any of that, it's prudent to build the setup I want to build first in case I need some of the parts from that, especially for reference to see where things went and how they went. So what I'm going to do is when I put this thing in, the 5.9, I had to put an HE351 turbo on to fit down there and hide in that little hole, which means I have spare HX35 turbo from the Cummins. I also have another HX35 turbo off this one that I won't be able to use because it's going to get a E351 when it goes in a Ford as well. So that means I have 2 spare turbos. And if I have 2, that means Peg has like 20 spare turbos. So I'm going to put a HX35 turbo on this thing. I'm going to build the manifolds. I've got lots of spares because of all the IDIs. So I've got the ones off the turbo. I'm hoping not to have to use. I've got some natural parts like that. And I'm going to try and make it work with factory manifolds. If I flip them upside down, I can run the manifolds to come up instead of down. In which case, I should be able to do a crossover pipe to a turbo in the middle, boosting right down into here. I don't know if I'm going to do intercooled. Intercoolers are a particular challenge, and I know it's hokey not to do an intercooler, but I mean, there's nothing that says I couldn't build it and then have it intercooled later. All you'd have to do is spin the turbo around and have the turbo come out this way instead of that way. That's all stuff that I can do. But it should be neat anyway, because I've got spares of these things and I'd like to turbo one. I understand also the problem that turboing a high compression one, you're going to be more limited in your output. If this was an actual IDI turbo engine, it would have bigger rods, lower compression. It'd be a better engine, but I don't have one of those. I thought I had one of those. It turned out to be a 6.9 piece of crap. So, and to all the people out there that say the 6.9 is a better engine, it's not. Quit arguing. It's not. Junk. So there's a 7.3 IDI turbo, and then there's a 7.3 IDI turbo. I think that looks a little more presentable. It's a little more hokey, of course, but it's all spare parts. I am into this project for, I don't know, that's $40 worth of 90s. And some chunks of dirty old exhaust pipe that are off of 7.3 IDIs. I mean, they're the right parts. The only thing that's wrong is the old HX35 off the Cummins. As you can see, it's set up to boost directly into the intake, but you could run it out the front and go to an intercooler and have it come back, and there's room for everything. So that's just the way I have it set up. I built it to be like that. And I managed to just flip a left manifold upside down. It's kind of hokey, but I think it'll clear everything from my measurements. There's nothing I could do to make a manifold work. I tried re-welding another manifold and changing the angle, but it still came out the back too far and had to curve back around, and it's just not going to work. So what I did was I welded it shut, and I just welded on an adapter, and it does flow properly. It is the right size. If anything, it's probably, you know, the distance to the turbos might be too far. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on this part of it. I just make things run. I didn't say they ran properly. The wastegate looks kind of goofy sticking out like that, the wastegate control, so I might just delete that. But if I delete it, the turbo on this thing is going to delete the head gaskets. That's the real concern. I tried to incorporate this chunk of Star Choice satellite dish mount into the exhaust system, but it was too small. Yeah, next is going to be to build a turbo feed and drain line. And then we can test run this bad boy. So here we are. I've built the boost pipe. I made sure to leave room so it could be intercooled if it had to be. And then, as you can see, the old breather is now the turbo drain, which is the way it is on the IDI turbos. And then the feed line is where it used to pull oil pressure from. Unfortunately, I don't have anywhere to put the oil pressure sending unit just yet. Obviously, if you put it in a vehicle, it'll need that. I know it makes oil pressure because it was out of this truck and it ran. And the, let's see what else. The fuel system's been purged. It's pretty much ready to test run at this point. Yeah, I don't see any reason why this shouldn't work. My only concern is that the length of pipes running around might be too long and cause all kinds of lag, which is already a problem on the smaller turbo on the IDI. But I suspect that that problem is that the compressor wheel is too small, because you have to be more than halfway up the RPM range to get any boost out of that thing. And you could hear it spinning. So with an HX30, or I don't know, the 35, this should be quite a bit better. We'll see, I guess. There's only one way to find out. I obviously don't have the manifold sensing line on or anything, but there's no point in doing that. It's not going to make any real boost because it's just sitting on an engine stand. Yeah, all we can do is try. That's it. So I forgot an important step. I never tightened the manifold. I'm just going to give it a little taste, just a little. Oh, really? All right. It's got some manifold leaks. It's got a leak right here at the turbo, and it's got a leak still on the manifold. But it does work. I can hear it, so. Now, I'm not sure. I might have to look into this, but it's oiling pretty bad. So it's possible the seal's gone in this turbo, because I did have to reorient it, and that's an aggressive thing to do to an old turbo. I have spare turbos, but yeah, we'll see. It might be that. It's probably that. The reason I say that is because, well, we'll see. We'll see. I'll have to play with this thing some more, but something's up. I think I blew the head gasket. See that screen? That's the hole I drilled for a crankcase breather. And I don't think it likes the amount of boost it made, even just revving it up a little bit. That's not good. I think I blew a head gasket. There's an immense amount of blow-by coming out of this. I can't think of anything else it would be, because that's the only breather port, because I drilled it, because I blocked off the factory ones. So boost goes into the intake manifold, and then the drain drains into the pan. It's pretty straightforward. So this thing might have already had a bad head gasket, and I didn't know because it was naturally aspirated. I didn't drive it a whole bunch. I drove it home and then pulled the engine out. So it's possible that that's the case. I have no problem putting a head gasket set in this thing, because I wanted to have one spare 7.3 to do some cool shit with. So that's not the end of the world, and this thing's pretty easy to work on right now. Even the turbo setup, now that it's set up, all you do is unbolt this side and unbolt the, you have to actually take the manifold off on this side, and then the whole setup comes off as one. I need to figure out what I did to this thing to destroy it so badly, because clearly it's got an immense amount of blow-by. So, yeah. I wonder if revving it at idle, it made enough boost. It shouldn't have, but it could have made enough boost to hurt something. I don't see how without load on it, but you never know. This HX30 in this factory form should make, actually, I don't know. The HE351 makes about 21 pounds. Or is it 30 pounds? I think it's 30 pounds. Anyway, this thing, I don't know what it limits itself at, and it wouldn't limit itself without this connected anyway, but I don't think it would make that much boost. Well, I mean, this is a successful failure, we'll call it that. Also, this thing has a lot of vibration because it's sitting on exhaust pipes, essentially. Like, there's nothing actually holding the turbo up. This was just a test run it. What's going to happen is I'm going to use the lifting eyes on the front and the back, add a square tubing, and then I'm going to put a triangular support across the two exhaust pipes to hold it nice and steady. And if I have to, I'll put another support off the side, because you got to keep the turbo steady or it'll rattle everything to death. It'll probably wreck the turbo really quick. But for the purposes of test running it, it works. Yep, it's pretty sweet. I left enough room so that theoretically, with the measurements I took, this should clear the firewall on a OBS Ford. I'm not saying that's what it's going in. I don't know if what'll go in and when. We'll see. Something.